Hi everybody, and welcome to this revision video on the trait theory, which focuses on Hans Eysenck's personality dimensions. This is part of the psychology of the individual topic for stage 2 psychology. Let's get started. So, before we actually go into Hans Eysenck's dimensions, let's just recap or go over what the trait theory is all about. So the trait theory of personality is the most influential in describing it and predicting behaviors as a result. So once we can describe what personality is, and this theory theorizes that it is made up of various traits according to different dimensions and different structures, it will then be vital and very useful in predicting future behaviors. So if we can define what personality is with traits, we can predict future behavior, which is imperative in psychology. So as we've already gone through, the psychodynamic theory was concerned with the why. So Freud obviously was very much focused on the unconscious and why we did certain behaviors as adults. So it could have been, that a child had a psychosexual fixation at one of the psychosexual stages, or that a person was ID dominant or superego dominant. So he was concerned with the why. Why did this happen? Or why does a person bite their nails? Probably because of a childhood experience. Now, we also know that the humanistic theory is concerned with the how. So Rogers and Maslow, Rogers obviously promoted client-centered therapy to allow the client to undergo their own growing in a safe environment, whereas Maslow took that and made an actual model, or the hierarchy of needs, which is something that people in his mind, and according to his theory, should strive for to reach self-actualization, which is maximum potential. So that was really on the how. How do we develop a healthy personality? Now, trait theory is concerned with the what of personality. And according to this theory, it's made up of various traits, which are dominant in individuals. And because of that, if we can identify what dominant traits someone has, it will then, like I said before, lead to predicting future behaviors as a result. And we can describe somebody very easily with obviously the traits that they show, or which ones are most dominant. So a trait is an enduring psychological characteristic which is unchanging and stable. So a trait that someone has is not going to change overnight. It's stable, it lasts a long time, in other words. So if someone is organized today, chances are they're going to be organized in 2 weeks' time, 10 weeks' time, 2 years' time. It's not going to change quickly. So there were two main theories linked to the trait conception. So there's Eysenck's personality dimensions, which is what this video is going to focus on. And there was Costa and McRae's 5-factor model, otherwise known as the Big Five. Okay, so both of those terms are correct. I'm not going to go into the Big Five in this video. That's going to be in a following video. But that's the introduction to the theory. Let's now go into Hans Eysenck's dimensions. So just to recap, psychodynamic is the why, humanistic is the how, trait is the what of personality. So, Hans Eysenck first developed trait theory by reducing large amounts of data into categories, or in other words, dimensions. And this process is called factor analysis. So what that means in English is that Hans Eysenck reduced large amounts of data, so lots of different traits, in other words, and descriptions of people, into 3 dimensions, or in other words, 3 scales. And this process is called factor analysis, where we analyze the factors, or in this case, we analyze the traits that people typically display. So his theories led him to make an enormous number of predictions about how various personality types would behave in a wide range of environments. So he believed, in other words, that every single person in the world belongs somewhere on these dimensions. So some may be at very opposite ends of the dimension or the scale. Usually people are somewhere in the middle. But regardless, if we can actually identify and place people on each of these scales or dimensions, it makes it much easier not only to describe them as a person or describe their personality, but then again make predictions about future behaviors and how they would typically behave in a certain environment. So Eysenck believed that personality is biologically and genetically determined. So like Freud, he agreed that there is some biological basis for us being born with a certain personality disposition. So that people are naturally born with a majority of extroversion. There's going to be some biology determined because of that. So it's not solely based on our social environment or psychological environment. There is biological merit and it is genetically determined, according to Eysenck. Now, there's obvious problems with that, which we'll discuss in another video, but that's what he theorized at the time. So just a reminder that this theory overall came about in around about the 1980s. So it is the newest one of the three that we have discussed. So obviously that's still a long time ago. Since then, we've made more discoveries about personality and obviously the trait theory, but this is the newest of them. So even though there is some merit to what he says here about being biologically and genetically determined, it's not solely this. We know from the biopsychosocial model that yes, biology can explain some of a person's personality, but it's not the sole reason. So back to this. Hans believed that personality can be measured or, in other words, placed on 3 personality dimensions, as you can see here. So, in other words, scales. So we have extroversion to introversion, neuroticism to stable or neuroticism to stability, and psychoticism to impulse control. So Hans believed that we all belong somewhere on each of these 3 scales. Now, again, some people are at extreme ends, and most people are in the middle somewhere. But let's actually look at what these terms mean in a bit more detail. So we've got his 3 scales here, and we've got some more specific traits to describe it. So the extroversion to introversion scale. If someone is high on the extroversion scale, it means that they are very, very sociable, sensation-seeking, they love to talk, and they really love being the center of attention. They also thrive in people's company. They very much don't like to be alone. Whereas at the opposite end of the dimension or scale, we've got introverted, all right, or introverts, in other words. So these people are the opposite. So they typically prefer their own company. It's not that they're antisocial. It's just they often thrive and recharge their batteries when they're on their own and really value the concept of alone time. They also are typically more shy, more cautious, and more independent as a result. Then we've got the neuroticism to stable dimension. All right, as you can see, if someone scored high on this, they tend to be very, very neurotic, which I'm sure you've probably heard of before. So secondary traits might include tense, anxious, irrational, very, very moody as well. Whereas someone low on the neuroticism scale, would score low in terms of, and they would show behaviors such as being very, very calm, very, very relaxed, very level-headed, and an even temperament. Then we've got psychoticism to impulse control. So people scoring high on the psychoticism, or in other words, psychotic dimension, would actually be clinically insane. All right, so they would show traits such as aggressiveness, selfishness, lacking in feeling, and lacking of empathy. So this links into one of the topics we did last year in Year 11 psychology. Being high on the psychoticism dimension would indicate someone may have traits of or evidence of antisocial personality disorder. Then very low on the psychoticism scale, as we can see, very non-aggressive, so a people pleaser, very warm, very affectionate, very empathetic, and aware of others and wanting to please others especially. So just going back to the previous slide, Eysenck believed that somewhere we belong on each of these scales. So it's not you're extroverted or you're introverted. Some people can have certain levels of extroversion, so maybe between halfway and the extreme end or the high end of extroversion. So they are more extroverted, but they're not 100% extroverted. So it is a scale, all right? So it can change, and it depends on the individual as to where someone is on the scale at any given time. Okay, so that sums it up for Hans Eysenck's dimensions. So I hope you found this video useful. Any questions, as usual, let me know.